That's something I feel strongly about, and I think the board feels strongly about it. And you look at it, why did we think that our education is going to start at age 6 or 5? I mean, we're looking at, and especially teachers know, and I got 2 kids that are teachers, that how some of the kids get behind, and they're behind again. When I was out there talking from behalf of Community Foundation, I said, we have to start earlier. And people said, well, that hurts your program, Rancho Cielo. And I said, maybe we can just turn Rancho Cielo into an alternate campus Sunday if we're reaching these young people and they're not starting 2 or 3 grades behind when they get there. And it doesn't seem fair to me that a kid gets a different opportunity if they live in Carmel or live in Monterey versus whether they live in Pajaro or Chular.
So,
I caught her eating.
Yeah, early childhood education has probably been one of the issues I've worked the hardest on. The good thing is Governor Newsom has 3 kids under the age of 4, I think, or 3 or 5, and so he gets it. I ran 2 bills that were early childhood education bills. Both of them hit the governor's desk. One of them was signed, which was a pilot program in this tri-county area to take all the funds and to be able to, all the different funding sources require that when a person comes in, you have to ask what their income is and then where they live, and there's all kinds of restrictions on whether that child can be put in that particular child care situation or put somewhere else. And the pilot program gives them the flexibility to fund the kid no matter where they're at. And so hopefully that's going to be utilized. It's an agreement with the Department of Education to be able to use the funds differently. We were returning $2.5 million in real hard dollars because we couldn't match the kids with the slots. And to me, that's ridiculous when we have such a huge need. So I think the challenge, the other one was basically a majority, my opinion, the majority of the kids that are in childcare, in non-parental childcare, are being taken care of in an informal system that are grandmothers and cousins and nieces, and those individuals, they love the kids, but they don't have any early childhood education development skills. And so many times they're put in front of a TV, or they're put in situations where they're really not learning anything. And so my other bill was, which got vetoed, was the one that would have provided a pathway for them to be able, because they're small businesses, like it or not, and mostly they're Latina, is to create an opportunity for them to get the education they need so that they really do have the skills and they can start expanding into a licensed care program. But what we're going to be looking at this whole area, because part of what's happened is that we now fund education at the highest level that it's ever been funded before. And many of the school districts have moved to extended day kindergarten classes or preschool programs. And it's to the detriment of their other programs. And so we got to figure out how to make this even and more balanced, and it's going to be expensive, and so that's really an issue that we're going to have to deal with in the budget. In regards to the payday lenders, let me just say that it's really easy, and I agree. There's some examples that are just horrific. I don't look at the ABs until I hit the Senate because they got to get through the Assembly first. So we'll see what happens with the bill you referenced. But I have a bill that creates another opportunity. So for those that are working, it's called an earned income loan. And the way it works, and this has come out of pressure on the system to create alternatives that don't have predatory insurance or interest rates. Most people get paid there are a group of people that get paid bi-weekly, right? Every 2 weeks or at the end of the month. And so you've earned income during the period of time that you're waiting for your check to be paid. And it really is for the situation where something happens, and if the federal shutdown, honest to goodness, taught me that people that earn pretty good money working for the federal government we're living paycheck to paycheck. So this is a huge population. It's not as small as I thought it was. So it's something like 70% of the people that are working in this country don't have more than $400 in the bank. So as a consequence, you have something go wrong that is unanticipated. You have need for cash. And that's where the payday lenders come in. It's easy to say, let's just get rid of payday lenders. The problem is that I have family members that use payday lending. I can't convince them not to. I have offered to set up an account that's a little payday, and they can borrow it and then pay it back, and then it's always there for them to borrow, and they still use payday lending. And I've helped them to pay off a payday lender and on the agreement that they will never use it again, and they do it anyway. It's because it's something that they understand and they're comfortable with, and it gives them the flexibility to be able to just do it on a moment's notice. So I'm looking at the abuses, but I'm afraid of cutting it off entirely because they'll go to a black market. It'll just be something that, and frankly, with the internet, there's no way to require them to be licensed in California. They're doing it anyway, and frankly, the tribes have gotten involved in it. And they have associated themselves with unsavory businesses, and under the guise that you can't, they're a nation unto themselves. They can do, and that there's a court case on that. So my point is that my bill is an earned income. It's called earned income program. You can access it through an app. And it's a monthly fee. In other words, if you use it, it's $5 to $12, and there's no interest. There's no interest, and there's no penalty, because what happens is you get paid automatically when you get your check. You sign up and it comes out of your check. It's the money that you already earn, and there's protection so that you can't overdo it. And it's really meant to be a one-time, I mean not a one-time, but a periodically when you need that cash. The beauty of it is, most of the time what will end up happening is the individual, if they can't access cash, will end up paying overcharge fees because their bank, they use money from their bank, and so then it's $25 per bounce check. Or in order to, if you don't pay some of the things like your utilities, there's a fee on top of that as well, and the fee ends up being a lot more than the $5 or the $12. So it's a new concept. I've been real excited about it because it provides an opportunity for workers to be able to access cash using their own money, and there's no opportunity for collection either. So you better be honest about how you use it, because you can't just move on to the next person, because they can't collect from you, but then no one's going to lend you that money in that way again. So.
On the early childhood education, you were right on. I mean, I walked precincts this last time I ran in Castroville, and 75 to 80% of the houses on a Saturday was a grandma watching the kids.
Yep, that's right.
And most of them didn't speak English.
Yeah.
And they were raising
the kids. Yep.
What other questions do we have?
This is a
Yes.
Hi, my name is Catherine Crockett, and I'm with the Monterey Peace and Justice Center. And I'm curious about your views on the Green New Deal and opportunities it might present as far as opening up new jobs, new industry, and also dealing with the critical issue of our climate.
Well, let me jump in. And this is really, I think, really important. I support the concept of the Green New Deal. Honestly, 100%. The devil's in the details. And let me just say that part of the challenge with a lot of the policies that I see that are proposed in the legislature are policies that create an impact that ends up negatively impacting rural California. And by that, it has to do with investment, economic investment. It has to do with so let me give you a real quick example. California has been the leader in trying to reduce greenhouse gas. And one of the things that we have funded heavily is a move to electrification. So it's moved to electric cars, right? I still remember the crisis, the rolling blackouts and the deregulation that created all of that. So I get worried because I go home and we plug in 12 things. I've got a state phone, I've got a regular phone, I've got a laptop. And so I support electrification, but I've been trying to get home from Sacramento now using public transportation for years. I used to hitch a ride with John Laird, I hitched a ride with Billy Monning, I hitched a ride with Jim Bell, I've hitched a ride with Robert. I'd rather not drive, I'd rather have public transportation. It doesn't exist. So my concern is that if you really want the entire state to benefit from a move to being greener and more sustainable, then you have to include the suburbs and rural California. So rather than spend millions of dollars helping people buy electric vehicles, people who can already afford them and probably would have bought them anyway, I would rather that we have taken that money and increased train service, increased the bus routes. I've taken MST in Salinas. Is probably the best in Salinas than in any other community. You talk to the South County mayors and they'll tell you that it's just, there's a bus that leaves King City, I think, at 4 o'clock in the morning so that people can get to work on the peninsula by 7. It doesn't work for us. And so I really, if we're going to do this Green New Deal, I want to make sure that there are opportunities for rural Californians to really be a part of the economic success, and that we're included in whatever it is that gets both the economic incentives and the benefits, so that we can get out of our vehicles, because it doesn't work. It takes me the drive from Sacramento. You can do it in under 3 hours if there's no traffic, if there's no big trucks on the road, right? But it's about 3 hours, and if I take the train, it's 5, and the last hour is in a bus. So it's not convenient. It's not even a pleasant last hour ride, and to me, that's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. So I do support it, but come on, you got to include us in the whole thing.
And for me, I was first elected to public office in 2010. I was a county to the board of supervisors in San Benito. I didn't talk about the environment at all. I was younger, but it became my #1 priority as a supervisor. And I cut my teeth as a supervisor fighting for the environment and studying climate change and helping champion the first ban on fracking in the state of California through the initiative process in San Benito. And my priority hasn't changed. It certainly is my #1 priority moving forward in Sacramento. But Anna is right. I'm supportive of the New Deal. I've signed on to I'm a co-author for some resolution, but it's symbolic, this resolution. And yes, here in the state we're a leader. It's great to establish goals. But what I'm most interested in now as a policymaker is the policies that's going to help, result in changes in our communities that are going to allow us to meet those goals. Because Anna's right. I mean, you talk about there's so many different moving parts when it comes to meeting these goals, and climate change and mobility and transportation is a large part of that. And we're establishing all these laws about 100% renewable, which I'm very supportive of. But we're not talking about the grid that is extremely outdated and very expensive to replace. We have a grid that is outdated and that is not compatible with these goals and laws that we are passing. Especially when we're going to, electrify everything. It's very difficult to make a difference and meet these targets and to improve our climate here in California if we're not seeing the whole picture. And updating the grid and this whole crisis when it comes to utilities, it's a real big problem. And the issue is so complex, and the amount of money, we talk about budgets and how wealthy the state is, no amount of money is going to fix these problems we have. It's going to take a tremendous commitment. We talk about housing, we talk about healthcare, we talk about early childhood education. What are we willing to take off the table to make the necessary improvements? And those are the challenges and decisions we have to make in Sacramento, which is very challenging. But moving forward, especially for our region, the battle I've been facing is, as someone who feels very passionate about the environment, but also understanding that agriculture is the lifeblood of our economy here. And understanding that environmentalists and agriculture don't have the best relationship. But in my opinion, agriculture certainly has everything to lose under these climate models and the changing climate. And so coming together, working together to solve this problem, at the same table is very, very important. And I know I'm making that commitment to work with everybody to bring, stakeholders together. I know the judges as well and ANAs as well, making sure that we, are doing everything we can to support environmental preservation, protection, improving our climate outcomes, but at the same time, making sure that we're not leaving behind the lifeblood of our economy here, which is our agriculture. So.
Well, and unfortunately, sometimes the environmental community comes in and blocks some projects that appear to be viable. Like, take for instance, I mean, if we have more housing near where people are working, it's a big way to go forward in eliminating greenhouse gases. And we're doing, it's important that you do that. You look at Pebble Beach, they did this farm worker or the housing for their workforce. And they didn't want it. And they said, that's fine. We're building this new thing, so we'll build it here. It's going to cost us $9 million to build it here, or if not, we'll go down, do it, and we'll just give the $8 million. Well, it makes complete sense to eliminate that. What Anna says about trains, we're trying to do a lot on trains here in Salinas to get us up to San Jose area. And there's actually a private developer that's proposing to come in and maybe do some more on trains, which would. California has been the worst on trains. You go back east and you go from Boston to New York, you go from Washington, D.C. It's like, when I was a kid growing up, there was the old red car that went from Ocean Park straight down to L.A. My dad was always working, so my mom didn't drive. That's how we got from places. What they do 50 years ago now, they tore out all the tracks. They have the same thing in Long Beach going down there. So, I mean, we just did some really crazy things. So we left those tracks in the middle of Venice Boulevard. You'd have, the housing. Other interesting thing that we're developing out in North County at the old power plant in Moss Landing is Vistra is going to have the largest battery storage facility in the world. Right now it's in Perth, Australia, but this is interesting because the transmission lines bring the power then, and then we lose the power because it's sitting there because we've had the solar, we don't have the storage capacity for all the solar and wind generated. And they'll build in the existing facility, they'll invest $300 million into that and another $100 million into the actual thing. So it will be a huge thing, and it's all clean energy, which is positive.
Let me give a real quick example of some of the challenges that we face, because what I want to use is really good science, and I think part of the challenge is that and I don't know if it's that rural California has been, well, let me stay away from the public, from the political part of it. Let me just say that when California decided to set some standards for energy, moving to renewable energy, a decision was made to exclude energy that was created by the movement of water, or hydroelectric energy that's created. And the reason that I've been told is that that the very progressive people didn't want to be building dams, and that makes sense to me. I don't, I get it. But as a consequence, there are a whole bunch of irrigation districts that in the Central Valley that now are in my district that generate energy that they then sell to their residents, and they also move water, which they use for irrigation. And they were excluded from the RPS standards. And there was no reason to exclude them. They were just excluded. And so this last legislative session, the pro tem had a bill that would, it's a statement, right? Those goals are statements that you're driving forward. And it was to get to 100% by 2045. And California, by adopting that, it would be the absolute most progressive state in moving forward in renewable energy. So I went to him and I said, look, you've got some irrigation districts. Here's what they have to do. They're, in the Central Valley, they pay the highest energy cost